International SEO. Is anyone targeting a market specifically not in the US or in a specific country? Yeah, a couple people. Yeah. So it's strong. So the idea here is if you're targeting a specific country, right? People in a very particular place. Here are the things you want to think about. The first is that a strong country-specific link profile is very important. And getting the country code top-level domain, or CCTLD, is important as well. So an example of this, I used to live in Singapore. I was working there and tried to start like an agency / consultant sort of business. And I was working with someone who owned a catering company in Singapore. And their domain was whatever it was, .com. And I was like working on it, optimized all these pages, did the keyword research, everything we talked about today, right? And I started building links. And I started building links, getting links from catering sites and from related things, and linking to this page, and nothing was working. The page just wasn't going up. I was acquiring all these links. It was relevant. They were good links, and the rankings weren't moving up. And I could not figure out why. And kept doing this, nothing was working. And then I realized that the keywords I were looking for were very specific to Singapore. So it was Singapore catering in Singapore, right? Different variations of that. But the majority of my links I was getting from US sites or just like generic .com sites, right? I didn't have any Singaporean links. So my domain didn't look relevant to Singapore. So once I realized that, I just stopped doing any link building that wasn't from a Singaporean domain, so .sg or .com.sg. Just started getting as many links as possible from Singaporean domains. And I don't know what the threshold was, but there was some like invisible line I crossed where I got like that one more Singaporean link, and then all of a sudden all my rankings went up, and I was in the top 10 for every keyword I was looking for. So the idea was like, Google didn't have an understanding of who my domain was for. And then once I crossed some threshold that they have, all of a sudden I was relevant to Singapore. So if you're focusing on a specific country, you want to get a large number of country-specific links. So, right, if it's in a particular place, getting links that are from that country is really helpful. Yes. Right, it's a good question. So what I found is, in general, there's a handful of what are called global TLDs. Like .com is a global TLD that can kind of work anywhere. There's other like startup-y ones that Google has whitelisted as global, like .io, even though that's technically for Indian Ocean, right? Or .ly is technically Libya, but it's like all these startups are using it. So there's a handful of whitelisted ones that can kind of work anywhere. Where you find problems is people that get like a cutesy domain extension that is truly associated with another country. So .it, like I've seen a number of people use .it, but I highly recommend against it because you have to do a disproportionate amount of things to convince Google you're not an Italian domain, right? And it's a lot of work. It's very, very hard. So the rule of thumb is like stick with a global one, stick with a .com. If you are everywhere, stick with the .com. And if you're focusing on a specific country and you have no plans to expand beyond it, like I'm doing something for France, I'm not going to go beyond France, get the .fr, right? That's the way I think about it. Yeah, really good question. So what do you do about non-Google search engines? So a couple things. So first, Google is the dominant search engine in most places. So most of the time, you don't have to worry about this. The exceptions in general are Russia, Korea, and China. Japan, Yahoo Japan does have significant market share, but it's actually the Google algorithm that powers the search results. So even though it's the Yahoo Japan interface and it's like their revenue scheme, you're only optimizing for Google still in Japan, which is pretty interesting. What I found, like this was an interesting one with Russia. I did a whole thing around like Yandex optimization with Airbnb, and it turns out like it's the same things that Google's looking for. They're weighted differently. You can be more aggressive on some and less aggressive on others. But in general, if you're doing what's good for Google, you're getting 80% of the way there with everyone else. Like most people say like Yandex, Baidu, and Naver are like a year or 2 or 3 behind Google, but all of these, there's not like anything that's wildly different. Like, oh yeah, you can just make stuff up and like links don't matter, right? So all of these principles are kind of catered towards Google, but they really do apply more broadly to other search engines too. Yeah. So there's a couple ways to manage this, right? Country code top level domains are always best. With that said, it's really annoying to manage lots of different domains. Airbnb has 55 top level domains. Most regular startups don't want to do that. It's really annoying. So if you're in a pinch, it's okay to use what's called a country code subfolder, right? Domain.com/UK, domain.com/CA, domain.com/BR. We did this at PayPal, and it's okay. The problem with this is that you still need to do a lot of link building to your subfolder, right? So Airbnb.com.mx, everyone knows is for Mexico, right? Google knows that like immediately. But PayPal.com/MX, that was where PayPal's like Mexican site was. And we had to do things to get links from Mexican domains pointing to the subfolder. So most people don't need to worry about this that much. Like if you're expanding your global footprint really fast and you have to have all these separate sites, you worry about this. But most people don't need to worry about this that much. I just kind of wanted to touch on the fact that you should consider your audiences based on a country basis, right? That's how we manage it at like the enterprise level. The other thing people debate is subdomains versus subfolders, right? fr.tommyswebsite.com versus tommyswebsite.com/fr. But subdomains are very technically difficult to manage. There's a lot of weird stuff going on there. So if you have to pick one or the other, I usually choose subfolders. They're just easier. You can set your country in Google Webmaster Tools. So if there's a particular country, you can say, hey, this subfolder's dedicated for France, dedicated for Germany. But it's usually not enough. I haven't ever seen that be just the only thing you need to do. So you should do it, but it doesn't seem to do that much. And then the last one is rel alternate. The rel alternate tag is something you can throw into your header. It tells Google all of the alternative versions of your site. So you're on tommyswebpage.com, and in the rel alternate tag, it would say the French version is here, the German version is here. You can set all these things up in your tag. Right, so whenever you're not sure what to do, I like to look at what the big dogs do. So we're at Apple. You go to Apple's global homepage. You click the Italian flag, apple.com/IT, right? So there's Apple doing country code subfolders.